BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this Zodiac Killer interview here on Black Box Online Radio. On Fridays, I'm trying to put out the Zodiac interviews, and every Monday I do a podcast about the Zodiac called the Zodiac Killer News Report here on BBOR. My guest on the program today will be Chad Burke. He is the author of Cracked, an e-book that is about the Zodiac Killer Ciphers. Now, some of you who are regular listeners and watchers of Black Box Online Radio will notice that there is a bit of a different look to this episode, and because we will be talking about the Zodiac Ciphers, I thought it would be really nice to have them on the screen while Chad and I are going to have the discussion, as opposed to just seeing both of us on the webcam. So I'm going to play the interview clip for you guys in just a second, but first I would like to remind you that if you want to support this channel, you can hit the like button and subscribe, especially if you want to follow along with true crime discussions. On Fridays and Mondays there are episodes about the Zodiac Killer, and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays there are episodes about different types of subjects, and for the near future, I'm going to be releasing chapters of my audiobooks, Killer on a White Horse and Down the Dark Lane. They're both fiction, but they were inspired by the Zodiac Killer, specifically the Zodiac Manson connection. And a great way to support all of these efforts is to go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxnid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And you can also support BBOR with the Capital One Quicksilver. If you sign up for the Capital One Quicksilver, you will get a $200 sign-on bonus. I kid thee not. They will give you $200 after you spend $500 in the first 3 months, but that's easy. You just use it as your main credit card. It's like getting free money handed to you. I've done this myself, and I've done this with other credit cards too. It's completely legit, and it's very beneficial. And one more time, if you sign up for the Capital One Quicksilver, feel free to use the link that is posted in the description box and in the comments section. It should be pinned right up there at the top. And without further ado, here is the interview clip with Chad Burke, the author of Cracked.
Well, Chad, how you doing?
Pretty good today.
Sure. So, Chad, my first question for you is, what made you curious about the Zodiac Killer mystery to begin with?
The fact that he used cryptograms, I have always loved them my whole life. And one day I saw that he had sent some in, and I thought to myself, I should probably give these a look.
Okay, and do you follow other serial killer stories, or is it more of the cryptogram issue that you focus on?
Once I got pulled into the Zodiac Killer case, I did indeed check out other serial killers and kind of get an idea for the feel of the world and what I was getting myself into.
Okay, now you've made numerous attempts to solve the Z13. Would you say that you have completely cracked the cipher? That's something that the FBI would sign off on?
Not yet. I still work at it every day. I think that I've come up with a lot of good solutions, and I have probably the best idea of what it might take to crack that cipher right now.
Well, we have to keep going with that. What does it take to crack the Zodiac Killer Z13 cipher?
It takes a lot. I think zero knowledge proof is something I looked into, because without any kind of key, there could be a million keys, and so it comes down to secret information. What was it he was trying to share that would have only been known between him and the correspondent?
And what exactly did you find? Because you said you knew how to solve that. So in your attempts to solve the cipher, what information do you think that is?
Well, I went and I looked at Edgar Allan Poe's A Few Words on Secret Writing, because it was his quote that was used to challenge Zodiac. Any code made by man can be cracked by man. And so I checked out that essay, and within there was a couple of cool codes and methods. One was the split alphabet cipher, which is almost surely what you see when you look at Z13.
And for the audience, what is a split alphabet cipher?
A split alphabet cipher is when you take the alphabet and you cut it in half. And so as you see the code, it begins with an A and ends with an M.
Yes, yes.
All right.
No, yeah, continue.
All right, yeah. So that's basically the split alphabet cipher, and there were other ciphers that he used in an attempt to disguise the message. There was one that used a cipher wheel, and there was other various methods in which the book could be used, a very rare book, as a method to hide something.
Oh, and do you mean like using a code book, or that there's a particular piece of literature that would have the clues?
It could be literature itself. I also got the idea that the code may use more than one type of language for the keys. The code ciphertext appears to read Anthiki Mionam or Anthiki my name, which is dedicated to my name in Greek and English, and I thought that could perhaps be a clue.
Do you mean that you believe that the Zodiac Killer's Z13 cipher might actually be written in Greek?
Yes, it could be any number of languages, but Greek or Latin, perhaps even Japanese, may be the best bet.
Now, before we go any further, though, I would like to ask, though, how many hours do you think you've spent trying to solve the Z13?
I don't think I could put a number on that. I think it's been over 5 years. And whenever I have free time, I do invest into this hobby because I do believe it can be solved. I think that he wanted most people to look at the fact it was only 13 characters, think that it couldn't be solved, and now he's tricked the logical majority into never trying to solve it.
Right, because I did a video once on the Zodiac Killer's Z32 cipher, and I was talking about a website that was dedicated to the Z32, and the guy said that he spent 100 hours trying to solve the Z32 cipher, or 100 hours of examination, and somebody wrote in the comments section by saying that 100 hours, that's nothing, and you spent 5 years on the Z13, so it appears that that is mostly true. But as far as the methods that can be used, some people believe that a cipher is more difficult to solve when there are a fewer amount of symbols. Do you agree or disagree?
I think I would agree. I think it comes down to methodology and the actual statement of the message itself. I think there is a something that can be agreed upon no matter what. I think there's a message like there was something he used in a later communication, one big 13th. So to me, that's an idea with a clue that perhaps the cipher is meant to be like a 13-letter word or something that is takes up the whole space.
But here's an important question. The Zodiac Killer has released other ciphers, the Z408, the Z340, and the Z32. Two of them have been cracked and solved, and they are the Z408 and the Z340. Now, the Zodiac said that his identity would be found in the ciphers, but when the Z408 and Z340 were cracked, they didn't reveal anything about a name or anything of the sort. Do you believe that the killer's name is found in the Z13?
Maybe in some form of initial signature. I think it's more likely to be some kind of logical riddle-like thing that toys with him that he thinks is the ultimate pun. When in reality, it's just his insane take on him dealing with the police and the media.
So that sounds like it's possible that the killer left his legal name, but you think it's somewhat unlikely?
I think it's highly unlikely. I think he was a narcissist and he thought he would never be caught. And perhaps the most he would have done is sign with his initials because that's not the same as giving your name. That's a whole lot of things they have to run down to maybe even perhaps find you.
Now, the Z13 cipher is rather different than a lot of the Zodiac ciphers, not only because of its size. I mean, you can correct me if I misstate anything. Here it goes AEN, then there's a Zodiac Killer symbol. There is what appears to be a circled 8, the letter K, a circled 8, and another circled 8. Then there is a shape that might be something similar to an anchor, and then it says NA and M. But the circled 8s are what people often zone in on, and I would cite Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, when he points out that the Zodiac Killer didn't normally use that symbol. Now, you have spent 5 years with the Z13 cipher. With those circled 8s, what some people call the 8 ball, do you believe that that has a special meaning to the creator of the Z13?
They were used in no other cipher as far as I know. Others have likened them to the Taurus symbol, and so I would say yes. They are either A, the biggest red herring of all, or B, absolutely the key point in solving that cipher Z13.
Right, because some people think that the circled eights, the 8 ball, is just meant to be a space. Like maybe you could think first name or something, and then the last name, maybe there are two other letters, and that they are just the filler symbols, or they're just meant to be spaces in between other pieces of information. And do you think it's a reasonable hypothesis or theory that the circled eights are just filler or spaces?
I think that anything is possible. I've used that into consideration. I've also thought perhaps they were hole punches or meant to be marks where you should cut, as if you cut the code into thirds, like he did the piece of shirt.
Right, and also the Z408 cipher cut into 3 parts, and that was mailed to 3 different newspapers back in July of 1969. So, you said you have several different solutions to the Z13 cipher. Do you have one that you think is the absolute best that you would present right now and say that I think this is the closest that anyone's come to cracking the Zodiac Z13?
I have one that I just finished this morning, actually, that is a 13 character solution, is a single word. It is all pretty much based on Latin.
And what is that?
By Nama Atene, which I believe means pretty much duly named. My name is duly named.
Well,
I've
that
yet
would be
to
something.
I've
Go
yet to
ahead.
release the cipher work on that, but I will do so later today so that people can see how that looks on paper.
Yes, I would love to see that. Please let me know because that sounds like something that would be in line with what the Zodiac Killer has done so far. But because you're a cipher guy, have you tried to solve the Z32?
I've used various attempts at that as well. I find that highly interesting. I think that though it's short, math is very precise, and I think math is going to be the key to that. Perhaps triangulation. I looked into the possibility that different points on the map were used to refer to a singular point in between.
But with the Z32 cipher, it really is quite different than the Z13 because the Z13 is frequently called the My Name Is cipher. But with the Z32, most people believe that it was talking about the location of a bomb. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yes and no, because he also said that to the cops if he thought he was going to take on a bust the way he said he was going to, they deserved to have holes in their heads. So you really just don't know with the Zodiac. He could have had something else entirely planned, and no, we didn't know that until the code was cracked. You know, he just was pretty much insane. I mean, that goes without saying. He was killing people. He talked about slaves in the afterlife. We really don't know how much of it he meant and how much of it he was just making up. It was really quite the silly little game he had invented.
Right, and I would like to remind the audience that I'm talking to Chad Burke. He is the author of Cracked. And I would also like to share that if you want to help this program, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below for other guests that you would like to have featured on this program, not only talking about the Zodiac Killer, but anything true crime. And you can also send things to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And if you would like to support this show, you can go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88 allows you to make a donation or a contribution to help support the show, and anyone who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But Chad, when I was reading your ebook Cracked, you talk about a lot of things that are outside of the world of ciphers, particularly a set of homicides that took place in 1967. Would you like to share some things about that?
Most certainly. I was researching the case, and that had happened just prior to the attacks of December 20th, 1968. And so I thought perhaps they were connected because it used almost the same exact gun. It was a 22 caliber gun that was used in those killings of Enadine Molina, and I think it was Fermin Rodriguez.
Yeah. Yes, and other than the similar gun caliber, what else did you find about the Molina Rodriguez murders?
They were both shot. It was very similar in that respect. The only difference I could find is that one of the victims was transported, perhaps kidnapped first, and she was found a little bit further away.
Right, and some people do believe that there was an abduction that took place prior to the Lake Herman Road murders. And giving a shout out to Ross Gerasi of Planet X Filmworks, who sent this question into the channel recently, asking me what I thought about the Molina Rodriguez murders, and that is that Firstly, it's much more similar to some of the Zodiac crimes in the 1960s, like 1968 and 69, than a lot of the other unconfirmed crimes. I mean, some of these things, like even Kathleen Johns, is very different than the Zodiac's activity in the canonical crimes. But a big difference is the victims were Latinos, and the Zodiac practically only targeted Caucasians. I don't know if it's a profiling reason, a victim profiling reason, or perhaps the Zodiac just simply wanted to choose targets because of convenience, but that is a difference all the same. And the victims, the Melina Rodriguez victims, were considerably older than the Zodiac victims, right?
I believe they were a little bit older.
They're in their mid-30s, right?
Yes, it's also been speculated though that he went on to kill Stein after it was said that he was only trying to kill couples. So I really, with his MO, I'm not sure that he had anything set in stone. I think that he just thoroughly enjoyed killing people.
Now, it sounds like you're coming at this from the angle of the Zodiac doesn't actually care too much about the victims as long as he is able to commit the crimes, and he is really only focused on murdering. Is it like that?
Yeah, I mean, the setup was very similar. They were parked and they were alone. And I think, like you said, it was a crime of opportunity.
Oh, absolutely, yes. But when I was reading Cracked, I noticed that you also introduced a suspect that I had never heard of before. And would you like to share that with us?
Absolutely. His name was Richard Angel. He was a park ranger, and I'm certain he's the one that called it in and was the one that came upon them.
And forgive me if I had pronounced his name Richard Angle on a previous episode of Black Box Online Radio, but it's pronounced Angel.
Yes.
Okay, and I got the impression from you that not only did you think that Richard Angel was a suspect in the Melina Rodriguez murders, but also could be a Zodiac killer suspect. Is that correct?
Yes, that was a name that I happened upon. I was using an Enigma type cipher, and I was using a variation of the Z340 code. And so I thought it perhaps contained quite a bit of security.
Okay, and other than the cipher, what kind of clues would point toward Richard Angel being the Zodiac killer?
Being in the location and the fact that he did call it in, which is exactly the action that the Zodiac did afterwards in the next crimes. Not so much at um, Lake Herman Road, but at BRS, Blue Rock Springs. He did call that one in. I'm not even sure that he did the attack on Lake Herman Road. I think that could be one of those things that's an in between.
Well, if the Zodiac killer didn't commit the Lake Herman Road murders, who did?
Another suspect has been proposed. He was a redheaded kid, Mike something. I can't think of it, but it was oh god, I can't place it right now, but it was just after a robbery, and his name was proposed, and some other kids had thrown his name in the mix, and it was said that he perhaps had thrown the murder weapon in the bay.
Okay, yes, and does this also tie into the story about how two jailhouse informants came forward after the shooting and they said that someone named Big Red committed the crimes?
Yes.
Okay, and then
And
the Big Red is not referring to David Walliot as people thought. He's referring to a kid named Mike.
yes.
Oh, yes, I'm gonna have to find that suspect's last name. And I mean, I went through a bunch of Lake Herman Road suspects in the past. However, I mean, as you said, so many things would be possible in this situation. But the Zodiac did take credit for the Lake Herman Road murders. The Zodiac did state some facts that only he and the police would know, talking about the brand of ammo that was used. The boy had his feet to the car, the girl had her feet to the west. Doesn't that suggest that the Zodiac killer committed that crime?
Perhaps. It also read almost identically to a police report, which I found very odd.
Oh, would you like to share more about that?
Just the very way it was written. It was very matter of fact and technical. It's a very strange way to write a letter, I would think.
Oh, you mean the Zodiac's letter was matter of fact and technical, and it sounds oddly similar to the police reports?
Yes, the formatting.
Okay, though, so because you have a suspect named Richard Angel, who was the he was the park ranger right after the Melina Rodriguez murders. How likely do you think he was the Zodiac Killer on a scale of 1 to 10?
At this point in time, probably not very likely. There's been a lot of names thrown out there, and there's just no real hard evidence I can use to connect him to anything other than being close to a potential crime at the moment.
In addition to your solution to the Z13 that might reveal his name.
Yes.
Now, Chad, there is an individual named Ray Penrod who has been more or less spamming lots of episodes of Black Box Online Radio as well as my Facebook page, and he talks about his Zodiac Killer suspect, Richard Ralph Mangan, whose name was Richard Mangan, and he changed his name to Ralph Mangan after 1969. And one of Ray Penrod's biggest claims is that Chad Burke has solved the Z13 cipher, and it reveals a solution that says, "My name is Mangan." Firstly, are you familiar with everything I'm talking about?
I am familiar with this guy, yes, and this suspect.
Okay, and can you walk us through the process that you use to achieve that solution to the cipher if you choose?
I'm not sure in particular if that's one I did use. I did share a method with him in which particular that he could maybe arrive at that solution, but I don't know if I can remember explicitly how that cipher that I sent him, if that's one that I sent him.
You mean you just shared with him kind of like the how to do list and like showed him how
Well,
he could achieve that solution?
yes, it was a A/B switch method that I call my zero knowledge proof that I believe wholeheartedly in. I think could be something that is used to crack the Z13 because it reminds me of photons in a photometer, and that is also very relative to his sunlight bomb that he supposedly was building that used an A/B switch and photoelectric switch to possibly trigger it. So I think he wanted the code to work the same way. I think he wanted the A/B switch to be like a photometer that triggered his name code to be like the bombshell revelation, if you will.
Fair enough. And does that mean that you think that the Zodiac likely had a science background or a math background?
I think he was definitely a puzzle lover. I don't know what he may or may not have had for a background, but I do think that he was definitely an avid reader of all types.
Yes, absolutely. I think so too. But then, what is your response to some people who are going to propose suspects who only had like a ninth grade education, the high school dropouts, or the people that were criminal lowlifes? Some suspects come to mind. Louis Myers was 17 years old at the time. Donald Lee Booyock had a ninth grade education. What do you think about people proposing suspects like that? Are they wasting their time? Are they completely off the mark? Or do they have some value to their
Well,
theorizing? What's your response?
it's 50-50 because some of them that have already been caught, they obviously have been looked over with a fine-tooth comb, and I don't think it's going to be that simple. But obviously, Zodiac wasn't that smart either. I don't think he ever did anything he's proposed that needed a super education or a college degree or any of that. I don't think he was that intelligent that anything he did needed or warranted that. So I think that they're absolutely right in the respect that it could be somebody that wasn't that intelligent that committed these crimes.
But there are people that would challenge that, most notably Gareth Penn, author of Time 17, who wrote a whole book talking about how the Zodiac had to have been educated like a master's or PhD level because everything in the case is just filled with mathematical signatures. So said Gareth Penn. And I'm sure you're familiar with Time 17. Why is he wrong?
Well, for lack of better terms, last I knew he was in trouble for harassing people, and his suspect, I believe, is Michael O'Hare. That didn't really go anywhere. I don't know what else to say other than, he's more likely to get in trouble for harassment than to reveal who the Zodiac Killer is at this point. I wish him all the best, but I don't think that there is anything with his potential theory of Time 17. I've read the book, and it certainly is very interesting take on it, but the mathematics I don't think reveal anything more than his own inner workings of his mind trying to find something within. Like they say, the pattern seeking animal.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, for the audience, Gareth Penn's Time 17 is just filled with how the Zodiac Killer may have inserted clues involving Morse code and binary and angles into the Zodiac Killer mystery, that there could be all types of secret messages that have been hidden, mathematical signatures are loaded in all kinds of places. And I have a 6-part book discussion on Time 17 for the listeners of Black Box Online Radio. If you're curious, you can also hit the like button and subscribe one more time. And feel free to visit some of the playlists here on the channel. The playlist also is made for Time 17. Now, Chad, you and I briefly had the chance to talk once about the murder of Diane Louise Jerish in 1965. This is the Black Sapphire murder that took place near the Presidio in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I know you have some observations about that case. Would you like to share?
Oh, sure, I'd be willing to talk about that. I find it to be very interesting. There was also a possible connection there when the last place that she was seen was the Lucky 13 Club.
And what's the significance of that?
Potentially was the 13 cipher.
Oh, you mean the Z13, because that's why 13 symbols was chosen?
That was an angle that I looked into, yes, because it is still an unsolved case.
And how likely do you think it is that the Zodiac Killer murdered Diane Jerish?
That is way out of his known MOs. I would say probably a 1 or a 2 because it is still unsolved. But unless he is linked to something of a choking nature or a strangulation nature, then I think that those are pretty much off the table for now.
Right, and for the audience, the murder of Diane Jerish occurred in 1965. It's called the Black Sapphire murder because she wore a black sapphire ring that was not found on her person at the time that she was discovered. And as Chad said, she was strangled actually with her own bra and sexually assaulted with a tree branch. Horrible, horrible crime, but I also do not believe that that crime is Zodiac related. But right now, Chad, to talk about some of the other unconfirmed Zodiac events, would you mind if we go through them one by one out of curiosity, what you think like the likelihood of Zodiac involvement in them would be?
Sure.
What do you think about the murder of Ray Davis from 1962?
I would give that a somewhat high chance, but then again, you never know. It's a 22 caliber, and the whole thing about all of the ones down south, or was it him or wasn't it? I almost feel like I should say 50-50.
Would you also say 50-50 for the Domingos Edwards murders in 63?
As well as the swindles. I think it's all the one package, to be quite honest.
But then everything begins to change in 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, the student who was stabbed outside of the RCC library. Would you also give that a 50-50 chance?
No, unfortunately, as much as I want to say that's Zodiac, I have to disagree on that because Riverside is so adamant that they have a different suspect and it can't be Zodiac. I want to try to give them props here, whereas if they're saying that there's no way it can be Zodiac, then I have to agree with them for now, unless some kind of bombshell revelation pulls that wool from over their eyes.
And by a suspect in Riverside, are you referring to an individual who has been given the name Bob Barnett?
I believe that is still their prime suspect at this time, yes.
Is he your suspect for the murder of Sherry Jo Bates?
I would suppose he would have to be, given the circumstance.
But if there's a 50-50% chance that the Zodiac Killer killed Ray Davis or Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards or Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle, what percentage would you give to Bob Barnett being the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates?
I would say 80.
80%. Wow, so considerably higher. Now, the Zodiac Killer, of course, murders you might dispute the Lake Herman Road murders, but a series of homicides take place in the 1960s, including the Blue Rock Springs shooting, Lake Berryessa, the Stein murder. Then we have the Kathleen Johns incident on March 22nd of 1970, the attempted abduction off of Highway Route 132. Do you believe that was the Zodiac?
I think that could have been anybody, really, because that was after the main media thing had happened. Nobody really knows. There was no damage. Nobody really got hurt. Her car was destroyed. It could have just been some psycho pretending to be the Zodiac. It could have been him because of the lack of information. And it really, I'm going to give that just a 5% because it's gone nowhere. And the most that really turned up was her pointing at a poster and saying that was him. And, that was a very generic poster. We've seen that poster likened to hundreds or thousands of men at this point.
Right. But then, after the Kathleen Johns incident, the final unconfirmed crime that I will ask you about is the Donna Lass disappearance on September 6th of 1970. Donna Lass was working at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, and she disappeared sometime before the end of her shift. Do you believe that was the Zodiac killer?
That I think is slightly higher. That one, to me, I think there may or may not have been a correspondence even that connected to that, past South Lake Tahoe areas. I'm not sure if that was ever confirmed or not, or if that was one of the hoax ones. But for some reason, I get the feeling that she was a Zodiac victim, so I'll put that one back at 50-50 as well.
Okay, wow. So that is a bit of a different crime, but you're still giving it like the halfway rating. So as far as the ciphers go, we've covered the ones that have been solved and the two cracked ciphers. But the Zodiac didn't only mail in letters and ciphers, he also mailed in greeting cards. There's some people out there who believe that the Zodiac killer's greeting cards are all containing secret messages. A big believer of this theory is Dale Tulin, who is associated with the Case Breakers, who just thinks that you can extract large paragraphs of text from the greeting cards, like, I mean, multiple sentences all arranged and telling a story practically. Do you think that the greeting cards that the Zodiac mailed, like the Halloween card, Peek Through the Pines card, 13-hole punch card, do you think those contain deeper meanings?
It's possible they have some kind of outside the box puzzle use, but I don't really think that large chunks of text or anything like that are going to reproduce a hidden message. Absolutely not. I think that is a wasted avenue.
But what about just the idea that the Zodiac rearranged symbols on the Halloween card to have some type of deeper meaning, like maybe putting the skeleton in the shape of a crucifix, because, I mean, for the obvious reasons there, like the crucifixion, or maybe the pumpkin was placed on top of the skeleton's midsection. Some people believe that that was done actually because the Zodiac was impotent, and he's kind of like unconsciously ashamed of his impotent life. And what do you think about observations like that?
I think the key there would be to check out the card that he sent before it was altered and then the alterations he made, and really just study those alterations like you would the differences in one of those newspaper puzzles. Spot the differences between. I would take those two and I would just study those differences. And if you really believe that there's differences, I would try to find them. I'm not sure it's going to lead to anything, but I'm always open-minded to see, the kind of cool avenues that could be used. I think there's always a chance, and to keep your mind open is the best way to do it. Like I said before with the shorter codes, if he knew that, and I'm certain he did, that was too short to be solved, then that's what most people are going to say when they look at it and never attempt it. And so he may have just pulled the wool over thousands, millions of people's eyes without even trying.
Okay, though, but on the notion of short ciphers, we also have something with the Z32, and there are 32 symbols in the cipher, but there are only 3 symbols that repeat in the Z32, the letter C, the letter O, and a triangle, which could be a delta sign. To ask a very direct question, do you believe that the Z32 cipher is solvable without a key?
Probably not. The only way that I could see that being possible is if you literally used the code and the ciphertext and affixed it on top of the map in kind of an indirect way.
How do you mean, like, put a code on top of the cipher text in an indirect way? What do you mean?
Like to superimpose it, almost as if you were to take that ciphertext and you clip it off, and now you make it transparent and you put it over the map. Say you put a hole where the zodiac symbol is, and then you use the radians, you swing it around what's given on the map, the zodiac symbol, and then wherever that zodiac symbol lies that you think is the most obvious place, that would be where the bomb was buried.
Are you talking about something that's similar to what Kelly Marshall mentioned about the transparent overlay, and you can place it on top of a paper copy of the cipher, and it can reveal an additional meaning?
I think there is a chance with that particular code, because he did say this code coupled with the map. So there is definitely the potential that there was a play on words there.
And were you previously familiar with Kelly Marshall's documentary Zodiac Rush Editor and her cipher work?
To some degree, yeah, I have seen some of it.
Did she influence your decision on that possible solution to the Z32?
A little bit. I take information from all angles. I've definitely seen some of her work, and so I like to try to have everything in the back of my mind and burning when I'm putting stuff together.
But here's an important question. The Z32, as we said previously, could be revealing the location of a bomb. Do you think the Zodiac killer had a real bomb that was buried?
I think that's a 50-50. I'm going to say that a lot, but that's what he drew up was a very, I wouldn't say a complicated design, but for what he was trying to do, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I think it was just as likely that he was going to sit up on a hill and try to take pot shots with a sniper rifle.
Wow, a lot of people have been talking about that lately. I mean, we've had Melissa Rose Tappa on the program, and she is the webmaster of ZodiacKillerBomb.com. She has talked very clearly about how she thinks that the Zodiac was referring to himself as a bomb. And I was talking to somebody offline about this, and they said they also thought that the Zodiac was referring to a person as a bomb, like an additional victim. And now you're saying that maybe he was referring to himself as like us in a sniper-like situation, and I'm not sure if that's just a popular idea that's going on right now, or it could be completely correct that that's what the Zodiac was intending. And do you think that there are any clues in the Z32, as well as the letter that precedes it, that would suggest that the Zodiac was referring to himself as the bomb or human activity as the bomb?
Um, I don't know if I can say that directly. I do know in the first bus bomb letter, it was very strange when he was talking about the cloudy day disconnect and the A to B switch. If you look at the diagram itself, the B is placed directly under the A, and it almost gives you the impression that it's the very same as the Z13 cipher itself. So I think that's potentially a clue.
But in regards to similarities between the Z13 and Z32 cipher, what do you make of the French cipherologist, if you will, cryptologist, excuse me, let's use that word, Faisal Zarawi, who claimed that the Z340, Z13, and Z32 are mostly using the same method, and then he attempted to employ the Z340's method in the remaining two ciphers that we've been discussing, and he was able to get solutions that he thought were suitable. Is that something that you were kind of leaning toward being in agreement with?
Not really, no. I think that all of the ciphers are going to be independently cracked of themselves and that they're going to be split into three parts most definitely. I think that is the only thing that can be ascertained from what we have seen in the crack codes.
And do you think the Zodiac just had this obsession with the number three, like mailing in three parts of the cipher to the newspapers, mailing in three parts of Paul Stein's shirt, or is it just something that we human beings like to do, like dividing things into thirds?
I'm honestly not sure. It could have been that he was obsessed with it. It could have been it's just a number that keeps repeating. But I was thinking to myself, if indeed the Lake Herman Road wasn't him, then that mean he would only have killed three people. It would have been Darlene Farron, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein. And so there, that would be the number three again, which would be, kind of odd.
But then why would the Zodiac killer take credit for the Lake Herman Road murders if he didn't do them?
To throw the police off their game, he certainly was known for misdirection.
Right, absolutely. And the Zodiac did not appear to tell the truth all the time. But do you have an exact percentage on the likelihood that the Lake Herman Road murders were committed by the Zodiac? I know you said you have an alternative suspect, so that's why I'm asking.
I'm going to say that it's on the lower end for me that he committed those crimes. I'm going to give him a 25% that was Zodiac.
25% that the Lake Herman Road murders were committed by the Zodiac?
Yeah.
I wish we'd begun the show with that one. Wow, that is just such a well, it's a very different type of observation because, as you know, most people are just completely of the belief that the Zodiac killer committed the Lake Herman Road murders. I once said that I was about to drop it from 100% down to 90%, looking at alternative suspects, gang involvement, drug involvement, but then I pushed it back to 100. I guess you've shared the reasons why. As of now, though, I guess I just understand the solid narrative, but at the end of the day, the facts are going to be the facts of the case. And right now, Chad, though, I would like to ask you if you would like to share with the audience, where can people find your ebook Cracked?
Woodbook. It's on Woodbook. You can find it under my name, Chad Burke. And I will be writing probably a new book on the subject soon.
What's the name of the website?
Widbook, Widbook.
Widbook, okay, Widbook. And yes, you are working on two possible books that will be coming out in the near future, right?
Yeah.
And you are going to give us any kind of like teasing information about that?
No, one's going to be pretty much just an overview of the shorter codes from all my time working on it, and hopefully to be an inspiration to the younger generation that says, hey, maybe we don't have to think they can't be solved. Maybe we can toy around with them a little bit and have some fun, because that's ultimately what I want. I want people to just try, have a little fun, and you never know. If you find the name, then we're all going to be a little happier.
Absolutely. And do you have a final send-off for Black Box Online Radio in the audience?
Never gave up. Never give up. If he wanted us to think that it couldn't be solved, then most of the people have thought that, and he's won. So let's not let him win.
Chad Burke, thank you so much.
Thank you.